Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Yarns with Andy. Today I've got Daiman, Daiman Otto from DK Otto Limited. We're going to be exploring a little bit about timber, DFMA. If you don't know what that is, you'll find out soon enough. Welcome, Daiman.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Appreciate you making the time and coming over. Really do appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so my original training was in architecture, but actually before that I'd had a couple of years exploring philosophy.
Philosophy, you say?
Yeah, philosophy and history. So I came from philosophy, went into architecture, and through a range of opportunities ended up over in Melbourne and finishing my degree over there at RMIT. It's quite some time ago now. And so the career I've had is one that's kind of evenly split between construction, property development, architecture, but most recently it's in that kind of construction innovation space, particularly off-site manufacturing, prefabrication, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, the manufacturing and prefabricated industry's taken off in New Zealand a little bit, eh? Multiple companies trying to get into it.
Yeah, and it's a global trend.
Is it?
And it's more than a trend; it's actually a necessity.
I don't think it's really taken off in New Zealand, though.
Well, I spent earlier this year and late last year, I spent as part of a contract role with the Construction Sector Accord.
Did you?
Yeah, through offsite NZ. I had a look at the industry in New Zealand through a snapshot of about 20 or so companies. So I kind of understand the market really, really well.
Oh, yeah?
And also I'm doing something very similar in New South Wales right now for the New South Wales, Homes New South Wales through another organisation called Building 4 CRC.
Right.
So I got neck deep into the industry here. What we're finding globally in New Zealand, Australia and the States and other places is there's a treasury down requirement for construction productivity increase. And
So that's a no-brainer.
it's a no-brainer. It's not even a no-brainer.
Because the productivity in the New Zealand construction sector, or any construction sector for the matter of fact, is so poor.
Oh, it's
terrible.
It's in the toilet and has been for decades.
Yeah, and a job being over budget and over time is the norm.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think even people who kind of have a house renovated, their primary feeling after moving back into the house is relief, not joy, because relief that it's over. And so we do a pretty crappy job of looking after customers and clients and understanding what they want. But on top of that, we've got these meta economic issues around increasing age of the construction force, not enough people coming into it, and just absolutely through the floor productivity. So it's kind of like, it's not a kind of a nice to have. I think, I first got into the kind of the prefabrication space around about 2008-9.
Oh, yeah.
And that was because I had a friend of mine I went to architecture school with who was setting up a company in Australia. And at the time I was working for McConnell Property and then went into work at Hawkins. But anyway, I could see that there was a kind of a, what I find, and kind of there's a kind of a term for it now, which is gaslighting.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of gaslighting in the construction industry because you kind of feel that everything is kind of wrong, and you see lots of evidence for that, but no one's actually talking about it.
Welcome, Daiman. There's a platform for you to talk about it. Let's gaslight the industry, shall we?
That's right, and it's kind of not to be dramatic about it, but yeah. I think a lot of people that get into the offsite manufacturing construction innovation space are coming there because they feel that there's something really, really wrong, but there's also the hunch of a solution, and so you get a lot of people coming to this space that are effectively trying to find a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
And then it's a question about how they're trying to achieve that, which is, what we can talk about, some strategies about how you might be able to do that.
So you've spent enough time trying to do prefabbed houses in New Zealand. How much success do you think we've had in New Zealand implementing prefabbed houses?
Well, I think that there are areas, there are companies in New Zealand and globally that offer a similar kind of model. And in that kind of transportable single home space, there are companies with legacy. So I'm thinking the first one thing that springs to mind is Keith A. So Keith A have been doing it for for decades and decades, and they've got a product and they've got a market, and they've got what you could probably call product market fit. When you come into the more kind of complex areas in which we have a lot of missing middle typologies, in that kind of terrace, 3-level, 4-level apartment space, and even higher, which is kind of where I sort of am interested in. Very little there that's been successful, and also harder to crack because you've got far more complicated designs and far more complicated requirements.
Yeah, because your tumult tolerance, if you get that wrong at the ground floor, it's a lot worse up top, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quantum
Yeah.
wrong at
Yeah.
the top when you get to the top. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So, is it working though? The whole prefabricated housing.
So it's a bit like that saying, the future's here, but it's just not equally distributed. So in some cases, it's working well. In other cases, I feel, and some of the work we did for Construction Sector Accord was the idea of introducing product market fit. And product market fit is something I'm really passionate about because it's simply just a formula to find not only your product, but your market. And there's a way in which you can structure a process to find that. And the reason that's important is because I think that part of the reason of the kind of failures in the construction space around prefabrication, it's New Zealand, Australia, UK has had some really impressive failures over the last few years. I think it's because you turn your company into building buildings for people into paying back capital expenditure for equipment.
Okay.
And if you don't understand who your client is and what your market is before you go and start to get into the kind of the automation side, let's say, really you're in a failure pathway. It's quite a fragile pathway, and there's not too many examples of success. But importantly, there are examples of success. They just need to be a bit more thoroughly understood.
Interesting. So you said you've done work for the construction sector Accords. I want to dig into that a little bit more. What did you do for the Accords?
So this was a contract that was through MB and the CSA through to Offsite NZ, and really what that was about. It was about firstly baselining. So who in the market right now is doing offsite manufacturing, and how deep is that market? How deep is the understanding of that market?
So there's about 20 different companies from.
There's a lot more than that. There's a lot more than that.
Okay.
But what we did is we created an evaluation tool, and we effectively went and surveyed companies, asked them to evaluate themselves against these tools, and we interviewed them about what they did. So that was the first half. And then the other half of that was trying to figure out how to standardize language. How do we talk about off-site manufacturing in a way that everybody understands what we're talking about? Because that's a big problem. That's a global problem.
Okay. So if you had to define that for a layman.
Yep.
So traditional construction would be you bring all your material on the site.
Yep.
Stick build it on site.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Off-site
right.
manufacture is grab a house, slab on grade, plonk it on there, connect it to services.
Correct.
You're all done.
Basically, that's it. And it's the success or otherwise of how you do that gives you an edge and success in the market.
And what were the outcomes of that entire survey research that you did for the Accords?
Well, if we found that there's surprising depth and breadth in the market, we found that it's a very innovative space. We found that there are areas for improvement. What we were trying to establish is, and part of there's a few kind of goals with this research, and one of them was, well, what we have to recognize with offsite manufacturing is that they take far more responsibility and they're far more vertically integrated than traditional construction. So they might have a designer in-house or an architect or an engineer. They make the things in-house. They've got their own QA scheme. They've got investment. So they're far more capable of doing a better job when it comes to construction, compared to the average normal.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're pretty fragile because everything's kind of got to go your way to be able to kind of have that joined up effort make some sense on site. Your on-site construction gets their production facility for free, effectively, and in a lot of cases, a lot of their expenses are paid for by the client. When you have an off-site manufacturer, you don't get that. You have overheads straight away, whether you're producing or not. So really, what we have to find out is what's the best way of doing lots more labour in a controlled environment, far quicker, executed in a parallel fashion, such that the advantages that on-site construction has, are kind of met by the off-site manufacturing space.
So you've got quite we're in a housing crisis, Tim.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I don't see us solving the housing crisis using off-site manufactured housing today. It's not happening. Where's the blockage?
Yep.
What's stopping that from going? Let's go, put a pause on traditional construction and go a mandate to actually build off-site manufactured houses and actually support these guys to solve the housing crisis.
One thing we were very explicit about is that under the idea of modern methods of construction, which is kind of the umbrella term, you cannot simply just build everything off-site, and you cannot simply build everything on-site.
Agreed.
On-site building is actually, you use off-site manufactured things all the time. Windows, pre-nail, trusses, all those kind of things are actually off-site manufactured elements. So
they're small parts, though.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
But what we were keen to point out is there's a spectrum here, and it's about finding the right parts in that spectrum to deliver what we need in terms of housing. The great thing about housing is that it's quite a predictable building type. And because it's predictable, it can be reverse engineered to a large extent, and then you can find which of those parts, panels, volumes, and complete buildings make sense to do off-site. I think it'd be wrong to sort of give the impression that the housing crisis can be exclusively solved through off-site. It's more about what are we trying to produce, and what are the best ways to produce that thing to get to the solution that we need, and where is the best place as well. So it's kind of a complex kind of spectrum to think about, but ultimately things can be a lot simpler if we know what we're trying to produce and design and produce.
Yeah,
and that's when kind of the idea of the kit of parts comes in, or the product set comes in.
We'll talk a bit about that a bit later. The kit of parts, which I'm really interested to explore. But before we get into that, did the Accords take your learnings and do anything with it?
Well, you might remember we had an election last year, and
made in New Zealand, we seem to have an election every 3 years. I don't know. It's like pretty quick. You blink your eye and then you're at election year again. So
exactly.
I mean, I've been here 14 years, and it's almost normal for me to just keep having elections.
One every Tuesday, I think.
Yeah, and then projects get put on hold, projects restart. I'm just like, come on, there's better ways of doing things,
Yeah.
And that's why I'm all for a full infrastructure development plan for a nation, as opposed to a political party having a campaign for it. I disagree with that concept.
I 100% agree with you, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason I really mentioned that is that the construction sector accord was effectively mothballed.
Is whose fault?
It was mothballed. So like
mothballed. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did hit up Minister Chris Penk on that as well, and I challenged him, and I said, I don't believe that was the right thing to do, but should have been repurposed.
Yeah. Well, I guess as a consultant, not as an employee, I was kind of had the luxury of being on the outside and effectively just producing work. But what I do know is that the work that we produced and our project was one of the few to survive post-election mothballing. So we were able to continue and finish our work, and effectively what we established was, a survey of the industry, a deep survey of the industry. So this was not just about a desktop exercise. It was about understanding really these companies. We established a language schema, so a way in which we could collectively talk about the same thing at once and have good conversations. And we also did, with my colleague Kim Aitken, we did like a carbon assessment as well on some of the houses too, so some of the products. So we provided a good foundation, and now it's up to the industry to kind of take that and run with it.
Yeah, interesting. I hope something comes off it, and we're one step closer towards solving the housing crisis in New Zealand.
Yes, that's right.
Daiman, you've spoken about DFMA, Design for Manufacturing Assembly.
Yep.
What does that mean? Can you explain to us in layman's terms what that means and why the industry should care about it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I think in this space, generally in the construction innovation space, off-site manufacturing, we get really technical really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of to the detriment of communication, what the whole principle is about. I think for me, DFMA, and I'm working on this. I'm working on the kind of my definition of that. But basically, it's the idea that as an architect or engineer or designer, when you are designing, there is a person or a company making the thing that you're designing, and they have their own ways in which they know the best way to do this. And that's why we get things like span tables, and we get, standard sizes and all that kind of thing. And not only does that stuff that you design get made, it gets installed.
Yep.
So DFMA is just about joining up the parties in that chain with the best possible information. So, and for me, it's
when you say best possible information, what does that mean?
It basically means that you know the impacts of your design choices
In the construction world.
in the construction world.
So you're talking about how a design would translate into construction.
Yep.
You're asking designers to worry about buildability.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, fuck, that's the first. There we go.
Well, because I think that 100%. Because when we
Okay, how many designers do care about buildability? Let's be honest.
well, I think a lot of them do, but I actually don't think
Well,
that
do
a lot
they?
of them understand what that means or how to achieve that.
Yeah, how many of them would understand the impacts of temporary works on site?
Yeah, again, very few, and it depends. It depends what you're designing and how much experience you've
I'll
got.
tell you. So there's a building I worked on downtown
Yep.
not too long ago, and we had to rearrange the scaffolding about 8 times just to get the services up on the ceiling.
Right. Sure.
You're like, seriously, 8 times? Do you know the cost of that scaffolding?
Yeah. No, it's
The
terrible.
rearrangement of that scaffolding, organizing labor to come on the site.
Yeah.
Fuck, mate, it's insane.
It is, and like the impact, and that's what I call rework, right? So we have an eighth waste in construction, which is called basically rework or making do waste. And what happens then is that a designer with not enough information provides drawings with not enough information, which transfers to a builder with not enough information. So what happens then is you get into rework because they have to make do. They have to figure out the gaps. And so DFMA is about gap reduction. It's about having better quality information all the way through that chain, starting with the designer and even starting with the supplier and the builder. So it works backwards, such that we reduce that making do waste. So you don't have to put the scaffold up 8 times and down again because that'll be an absolute nightmare. And to the client, all that happens to the client is more time, more money. And so the big problem we've got is not the technical understanding of what DFMA is. What we have is a bunch of things in the way, particularly contract. So let's just say, we'll take the mass timber case, for example, because that's one I'm kind of quite familiar with. Now, the good thing about mass timber is it's kind of, from a product perspective, it's quite consistent. So if I'm getting a piece of CLT or a glue lamb from somebody and there's another coming down the road, they're kind of making the same product. But if I was going to design something and I hadn't fixed my construction system yet, what that means is I'm designing for X. And whenever we design for X, as in the unknown, we've got waste straight away. Yeah. And the other problem with that is
provisional sums, mate.
Provisional sums.
I ain't gotta fucking love that.
The QS's best friend. Yeah. No, I love my QS people. But I do actually. Yeah, I love it. I love a spreadsheet.
You love a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Fucking hate a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I hate the way we use a spreadsheet in construction. Sorry.
And I'm completely stereotyping and taking the piss right now. But
yeah. Anyway.
But when we don't know early on what the building's going to be, if we only know the geometry of something, how is it possible to get DFMA in place? And a lot of the times. The reason for that is because the client wants competitive procurement.
Yep.
And
carry on.
Right. And so when we have competitive procurement, we actually have optionality at that point. Because, this stair, let's just take a staircase. This staircase could be steel, it could be concrete, it could be proprietary system, precast, in situ, et cetera, et cetera. It could be speed wall. There's so many variations of what that thing could be that the design effort to figure out in detail what that should be, when you know at some point later down the track there's going to be some kind of procurement arbitrage, it means that actually DFMA doesn't happen. And what that does, it translates down to the site, if not properly managed, to something in which you have cost and making do waste and rework. So that's kind of what DFMA is. It's joining up the parties in the supply chain, the design chain, and the construction chain early on, such that waste is minimized.
So I'll step that conversation back to a competitive procurement model you mentioned, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm all for a competitive procurement model or a realistic one, right?
Yep.
In your lovely best friend QSs.
Yep.
When they actually take a design and actually go, here's the cost.
Yep.
How do they actually cost it up? Do you know how they actually cost it up?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've worked in enough construction companies to understand what that
they
looks
look
like.
at their
yeah.
last 5 projects of
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah.
And they take the aggregate or the average and say, yep, this is what it should cost.
Yep.
And come up with the budget.
Yep. And they might call some of these subcontractors and say, hey,
Here's the
you
problem,
price
though.
this.
Here's the problem.
Yeah.
Let me just stick with that chin. Here's
Yeah.
the problem. The last 5 jobs have all gone out to procurement to 5 different companies and delays on site, whatnot.
Yep.
And the cost of actually installing it is far greater than, because it includes the actual risks that actually happened.
Yep.
Yeah?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So when the quantity survey is actually now doing his budget based on the last 5 jobs, he's not getting a true budget. He's getting the budget plus the actual risk
Yes.
that occurred on site, that eventuated on site.
Yes.
Inflation, cost blow up,
Yeah.
happens right there.
Yeah.
So the client's not necessarily getting the best price for his buck.
Yes.
He's not.
No.
Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. And so this is why.
You see, that's the true waste we need to cut out.
Yeah.
What is the true cost?
Yeah.
What's the true budget for actually building something, and exclude the risk portion of it that actually eventuated.
Yeah.
You just can't go look at the last 5 jobs that happened and say this is the aggregate of what actually happened and here's your budget.
Yes.
It's bullshit.
It totally is. And it's interesting to hear you kind of like lay that out in like a clear way.
Yeah.
Because I've got a few mentors, and one of them's always said to me was, I'd rather pay for something that's worth $100 now than it being maybe between 80 and 170 later on.
Absolutely, because the amount of time you waste cannot be actually quantified.
Exactly. And so what clients should be seeking is upfront certainty.
Yep.
And upfront certainty that's locked in.
But that's saying the amount of middlemen you've got.
Yeah.
You're not going to eliminate that.
No.
Then look at the number of middlemen you've got, right from design through to procurement.
That's right.
Yeah, there's an estimator, there's a quantity survey, there's a project management company, there's like 3 different fucking designers, there's like insane amount of people between the client and the main contractor and various different stakeholders.
Yes.
How do you solve that DFMA?
Well, we can talk about kit of parts, because I think that's probably the only way that's practical that I think you can solve for that within conditions, right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend recently, and he's an ex-chef, and he said to me, because you always look for analogies in this space, right?
You look for what, sorry?
Analogies. You look for
Analogies,
other
100%,
companies to compare yourself, other industries to compare yourself to. Everyone goes to automotive and the offsite manufacturing space, but that's wrong. But the one he said is like, traditional design is you're a chef on a super yacht. Okay. If you're a chef on a super yacht, you need your stock of your food is everything and anything, because you could get a call from the owner of the super yacht who wants caviar, or they want lobster, or they want a barbecue, or this, that, the other. And so what happens then is the waste involved in that kind of approach is huge. Now, because you're a super yacht owner, you've got budget. So it doesn't really matter that the caviar that you wanted today actually you change your mind and it goes to waste because it goes rotten. Okay. The waste is covered.
Yeah.
Waste is taken care of. What we need to do...
By the rich people on the super yacht.
Exactly, because it doesn't matter.
So the people carrying the risk is the rich people on the super yacht.
Exactly right.
Okay, cool.
So our clients in the housing space need to kind of understand that they're not the super yacht owners. They are more in the cruise ship space. And when you're in the cruise ship space, you have far more curated options over what you serve the people on the ship, right? And the great thing about that is, yes, you might have volume there of people on the ship, but you don't offer them a menu with 300 different things.
So you have a set menu of 3 things on the menu.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And so let's not...
I see where you're going with this, because you then get down to a topology of a house and you say you get one of the 3 topologies that you can actually choose from.
Correct.
To then develop your piece of land.
Correct.
You don't actually get a free choice of a custom kitchen and, a massive balcony added.
Yes. Yep.
At a later point in time, which you've got to completely change your structural design for. I get that.
Yeah. And so the question to the client is, do you own a super yacht or do you own a cruise liner? Which one do you own?
So you're saying let's build more row houses like we do in London?
Well, I'm saying that we have this thing, and I think when has anybody really sort of walked down a street of Georgian terraces in London and thought, this is horrible? They're beautiful places.
I actually enjoy those row houses.
Exactly.
And have you been down to Hobsonville? I live in Hobsonville.
Yeah. I mean, one of my first, I think, the grounds was the project that we built on Hobsonville.
Yeah. So that main street in Hobsonville.
Yep.
that actually takes you down to that ferry building.
Yep.
That kind of looks like row houses, but it's kind of still got this little beautiful, unique touch.
100%.
The whole New Zealand touch of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it still kind of does give you those England vibes a little bit.
Yeah.
But I love that drive. Every time I look at that, it's like newly built houses.
Yeah.
Kind of almost row-ish houses, but
Yeah.
not really row houses.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I think there's a kind of a thing in building in which at the start of a process we pretend like it's this building's going to be unique and special, all that kind of stuff. And after the building's built, it's actually like pretty much every other building. That's why I was saying housing's great, because there's a predictability about it. And we've done the work. I do quite a bit of work over in Victoria and Melbourne. So the first thing we figured out when we were trying to create a kit apart system there was, okay, well, who are we building for? What does it look like? What are the spaces we have to deal with? And, there are things like design guidelines. There are things like accessibility design guidelines and, daylighting. We can actually know ahead of time what we're supposed to build. And with that knowledge, we can figure out a way to build that with high certainty. That doesn't mean that you don't fall into that trap of kind of relitigating the design, the construction, the cost throughout the construction phase. So I think the idea that, and Hobsonville is a perfect example, there'll be more similarity between those apartments, let's say in terraces, than what it looks like. But that's where your architecture is to a large degree. It's on the context of the street face, the streetscape, the elevations, materiality. But underneath the hood, they're roughly the same building.
Yeah, the shell is the same.
100%.
Everything you put in the shell could be customized, which doesn't really matter. It's the fit out.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing on DFMA that I don't think you've touched on, I've touched on yet.
Yeah.
Which I'm very passionate about. It's digitalization.
Yes.
And the power of digitalization to enable efficiency on site.
Yep.
Is vastly not looked at by the entire construction industry.
Yep.
Not just in New Zealand, it's in the whole wide world.
Yep. I agree. And I think that we're at this interesting time where some of the power and potential of digital tools is actually now coming to bear.
Is it?
I think it is. I had a experience working with inside a company called Lend-Lease.
Oh, Lend-Lease, yeah.
That's right.
Lend-Lease is awesome.
That's right. So
really cool company.
Yeah, and we were a part of a division there called Digital, and we were kind of building an end-to-end platform of how you're able to effectively automatically generate buildings.
Automatically generate buildings?
Yeah.
When you say generate buildings, generate the design or actually build the building itself?
Generate the design down to LOD 400. So
LOD 400?
full manufacturing drawings based on some digital inputs at the front end.
So you mean actually an input that you give a computer that actually then builds an LOD 400 model for
Correct.
you?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
With engineering solved, the kind of the engineering,
What's
structure
the tool
engineering
called?
solved. Well, that was called Podium, and that's still operating out of primarily the Singaporean government. But what I'm saying to you now is that there have been a whole bunch of companies globally that are trying to digitalize or productize, or have companies able to productize their products.
Yeah.
And it's only now in which they're able to do that in an efficient way.
Yeah.
And my view on that is, again, it comes down to that typological frame. So if we're trying to solve for petrol stations, hospitals, and luxury apartments with the same sort of thinking, same set of tools, we're not going to be able to. It's not a very efficient way to solving that.
No.
But if we focus on, in which I'm doing right now, we're focusing on 5 to 8 level mid-rise residential buildings in Melbourne, where there's sufficient scale. There's a $2.1 billion per annum market there. Sufficient scale to be interesting, sufficient scale to invest in that, and we're able to then back solve for the design and construction system.
Interesting. So we've gone on that path in strategic planning as well, down the whole digital space a little bit. Not quite a lot, actually. 1.5 years of just coding and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we've kind of figured out a way to take an LOD 350-400 model and get a full bill of quantities, which is Uniclass coded.
Awesome. Yeah, I love Uniclass.
You love Uniclass?
Yeah. That's what
why don't people in New Zealand or anywhere know what Uniclass is?
I don't know. And
it blows my mind. Like the number of designers I talk to that actually don't know what Uniclass is. And I'm like, Uniclass coding is internationally. Why don't we just fucking call a concrete slab, the exact SS code for a concrete slab?
Yeah. I know.
Standardization and naming.
It's one. Exactly. Standardization and naming and categorization.
Yeah.
Like,
but here's the beauty, right?
Yeah.
Our code would take any IFC schema put in by a designer and automatically label all the uniclass codes into a 3D model.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Would inject the information into a 3D model.
Yeah.
Then we're not reliant on designers actually coding the things accurately.
Oh,
I'm just reliant on them using an IFC schema.
yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And then take the fucking model off their hands.
Yeah.
Catch you later.
Yeah.
But the power of that from that point in time is then our Python code now actually recalculates all the quantities as well.
Yeah.
Because we've realized that the designers don't necessarily get the quants accurate in the model. Then we go one step further. We add 3 levels of location breakdown. Because you think about what my job is, right? I'm trying to make myself redundant here. Yeah?
No, I have the same view.
Okay.
Same strategy.
My job is to identify who does what, where, when, and how much of it.
Yep.
Right? My job's not rocket science. Fucking writing a program. It's simple.
Yeah.
If I can answer any of those questions at any given point in time of a project lifecycle, I'm doing an immaculate job.
Yes.
Yeah. And given digitalization, with this entire tool, is only the first step of where we're going.
Yes.
Yeah. Now I've got uniclass standardized asset classifications. I've got quantities. And I've got 3 levels of location breakdown.
And
now,
yeah.
just stick with me on this chain of thought.
Yeah.
Okay. If I've got quantities, I can get durations because it's a standard production rate.
Yeah.
The production rate may be variable from company to company. More or less, you can standardize that. Yeah.
When you say
production rate, how much of concrete can you pour?
Okay, so it's labor-driven production.
Labor-driven production.
Like time for install, effectively.
Yeah, time for install.
Yeah, cool. Please go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So once I've got that, I've got durations.
Yep.
For every single task.
Yes.
With standardized naming, I've got quantities, I've got durations, production rates, and location.
Yep.
Now, we've been building shit since the fucking pyramids, eh?
Yep.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I can now automatically go find a way to logically link all my tasks.
yes.
Which is not, again, rocket science. It's you've got to do your piling before your ground beams. You've got to do your ground beams before you kind of get your substructure services. Put your slab on grade in. Then you put your columns, then you put your floor slab, columns, floor slab, columns, floor slab. You get the numbering right, mate, easy.
I love it. And I think that like a lot of things, the material itself is pretty dumb. It's all in the interfaces. So if say for example you could create an algorithm in which you could judge the complexity of a job by the amount of interfaces between different kinds of products, because one thing that's a key to simplifying construction is SKU reduction.
Is what reduction?
SKU reduction.
SKU reduction.
So reduce the amount of things that we need to make the building.
Yeah.
I've got a great
number of products in the building.
Yeah, number of products. And so by reducing the number of products, you make things simple. You have similarity. You have self-similarity across the floor plate, let's say.
Yeah.
There's a great study I saw, because I spent about 18 months really get into construction research, which seems really dry, and it can be, but it's beautiful stuff as well. There's a whole area of construction research, which is an untapped resource in this space.
Yeah.
And one of them, from memory, something like they did a study of a hotel, and they found that in the hotel there was something like 3,000 physical objects, but only 98,000 BIM objects. Sorry, 3 million physical products, but only 98,000 BIM objects.
Okay.
Now, what that
unique objects.
Unique objects.
Yeah.
So what that means is in total. So what that means is you have something like, and I've done the math before. It's not my strong point, but let's just say 0.6% of the physical building documented digitally. Now, in a conventional building, like there's no way an architect or an engineer is going to design to within 100% of the physical digital kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But they'll get enough of the way there. But by productizing or digitizing, as you said, you're able to then move beyond geometry into the thing itself. So instead of saying this is a box and we call it a column, this is this column made from this supplier with this metadata attached to it, with this price attached to it, with this carbon attached to it. And
Wait.
Yeah.
Think about that now, right? Okay. I'm sorry, I've been working on this for a year and a half, so it's quite exciting.
No, this is download time. Let's do it.
Okay. So say now, if the designer uses an IFC schema to call the IFC class, the IFC object, whatever, label that part.
Yeah.
That's all you need him to do it now, right?
Yeah.
Now you go assign a uniclass classification to that particular object.
Yeah.
Now, that uniclass classification, you can then attach a shit ton of metadata to that uniclass classification.
Yep.
You don't need your designer to put it anymore.
No.
Yeah. Now, keep them doing what they're really good at doing, is designing, not metadata coding.
Yeah.
That's been an epiphany for me in the
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Because every time I've gone back to a designer and said, can you inject this information into a model? It'll take them weeks and they'll still get it wrong.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So take that off their hands completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use AI large language models to now inject the data back into the model, which is not hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then attach all your metadata to that uniclass. You want a timber frame, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There's an SS code for a timber frame. If you could assign the right code to the right product, then now you assign a bunch of metadata to that uniclass code. Here's my suppliers. Here's my, here's my discipline type. Here's, I don't know, you keep going, man.
Well,
you keep going for Africa on that.
You could, and I think actually having the metadata. I mean, yes, you could look at AI to populate the metadata you choose as part of your schema. The other way you could do it is ask the supplier to supply the data of their product in a way which you can then use. And I do think that the race to win in the supply chain space here is the one with the most data wins.
That's probably anywhere in the world. Yep.
Anywhere, I mean that would happen in any other industry.
Yeah. Look at Google. Look at Facebook.
Yeah.
Look at Uber. Look at every tech company out there.
Let's
all they do is they manage data. They don't do anything else.
That's right. But let's just take it. Let's wrongly go to the automotive industry. Let's imagine there's a brake manufacturer supplying brakes to other kind of brands. Do you think they're going to kind of rock up and just sort of say, here's your brakes, here's your brake set, good luck? No, they're going to talk about all of their QA, all the regulatory requirements, what the thing's made out of, all those kind of things, testing, all that kind of stuff. So we need to get our supply chain. This does go back to DFMA because the supply chain needs to provide some responsibility around what they produce, and they will be competing with other suppliers on a data basis.
Just so we don't end up in another James Hardy situation.
Yeah, or whatever. So so that way, I mean, you unlock your capabilities because yes, you could apply like a generalized kind of AI model to this. And one thing I should say is I'm not a technical person. I shouldn't be allowed near software or anything like that. It's not what I do. I'm very much in that physical product space and strategy space. But you're able to then rely upon the supply chain to supply the data about their own products and then have that compete. That's where you get your competitive tension will be on quality of data rather than on price. I mean, and I think there are so many things to say about procurement and where procurement's going as well and what clients are looking for.
In New Zealand or worldwide?
Worldwide. I mean, I recently saw a...
Procurement of main contractors and procurement of products?
Projects.
Procurement of projects, yeah.
So, I mean, one example recently of a tender in Victoria where 15% of the valuation was on price on a project.
15% of the valuation of only 15%?
Only 15.
That's amazing. Who's this? If you don't want to tell me, that's okay.
Well, it's public procurement of housing. So...
well, that'll be the first.
But what I'm saying to you is that with concentration solely on making stuff the cheapest possible, you're going to miss out on the opportunity for where the globe is going with respect to things like recyclability, circularity, performance, health, all those kind of things. So with that kind of data, if you can put yourself in an unassailable position in which the market can't compete against you, or at least a long time before they get up to where you are, that's where people should be seeking to go to.
But in New Zealand in specific, most of our procurement, even the government procurement, is solely focuses on one thing and one thing only.
Yeah. And are they getting what they want?
God, no.
The evidence is in the buildings.
Well, it is, yeah.
The evidence is always in the buildings.
And the amount of time it takes to actually procure things. And you know what? I've always thought the procurement model is completely fucked. Yeah, but I do have a vision for a different procurement model. Do you want to hear it?
I'm very keen to hear it. Very keen.
Yeah. All right, let's go. So think about this, right? So designs get produced. As a client, you give it to a project management company. The project management company then divvies that up and goes into the market and goes 5 different construction companies to procure. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. The problem is now, the problem I see is that the 5 different construction companies now create their own version of a bill of quantity, their own version of a program, their own version of a methodology or method statement submission to submit back to the project management company, the man in the middle.
Yep.
Right? The client doesn't know how to assess it. That's not a skill set. He's got the money. Yep. Now, this project management company would typically look at the 5 and go, right, do a cross comparison between the 5. Now, think about the quantum effort it's actually taken for the 5 construction companies to produce these. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're not talking tens and thousands. We're talking hundreds and thousands. Sometimes even in the millions to produce a tender.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been in that space.
Yeah. How much does it cost the project management company to then assess all of these tenders logically? Millions of dollars still. Yeah. So now, no spade in the ground, designs produced, right? But there's millions of dollars already expended by 5 to 6 construction companies and the project management company to assess one person to build it. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they go, and then the company might go, oh, this is too difficult to pick one. We'll just pick the lowest price. And they're not realizing they're taking on the most risk.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how about this, right? If you were a client, yeah, and you go, right, I'm going to now create a version of a bill of quantity and create a method statement and a program to build my own building.
Yep.
It's not hard with technology today.
No.
Okay. Now, your assessment criteria, you go out to market to the 5 different players, and your assessment criteria would be this. Simple, right? Mr. Main Contractor, you can verify the design, validate the BOQ. Yeah? You're allowed to change line items within my BOQ, change the pricing, okay, based on what you believe to be true, with a valid reason as to why. Yeah?
Provided the performance was still met.
Yeah, the performance criteria should still have to be met and change the product. You know, you want to introduce a sacrificial Docker formwork system. Cool, you know, that just gets better methodology, better whatever. Explain why. You're allowed to take my program and validate the scope, add in line items for missing scope, and or zero out the durations for existing line items. Yeah. So now I get 5 versions of the same program with unique IDs, all the same. That means all I have to do is drop all of that information into a dashboard and cross-compare all of them.
I like it.
Dude, this is like literally a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
Like, our industry just seems to want to do things the hard way all the fucking time. And I do not understand why. It just blows my mind. Like, okay, method statements, the same thing, right? We believe this is the most efficient way to build a building. Tell me otherwise, all right? Your assessment criteria is not going to be on just purely on cost, but it's how much money you're saving on the BOQ that we've actually produced, how much efficiency you're gaining against the critical path on a program, and how, all right? And I'd expect each one of those 5 construction companies to actually come in and give a short half-an-hour presentation on all of these criteria. Imagine how much time, money, effort we'd save just by doing this.
Well, what I like about that is it clients invest in their own outcomes. What I mean by that is, in order for a client to kind of have that kind of proposition to the market, they need to know very, very well what they want to actually build. And to know what you actually want to build, you have to invest in this kind of plays into the idea of like the kit parts of the product set.
Yep.
Particularly those clients with a portfolio or some kind of program to roll out. Invest in getting up to speed so they're able to go and engage the market in the way you described. Yep. And they'll get a much, much better result.
Agreed. But then the entire industry, the norm today is that how do you push shit downhill?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The client doesn't want to take the risk.
Yeah.
Push it downhill.
Yeah.
The main contractor tries to manage the risk.
Yeah.
Tries and passes it downstream. So you're passing it all the way down to a guy who's not able to manage the risk.
No.
That's our problem.
That's a problem. And it's what we call an asymmetric marketplace. So an asymmetric marketplace or information marketplace is where one party has more information than the other part, but they don't tell. They don't let that know, or it's not in their advantage to be able to share that information.
Yeah, because then you wouldn't be able to effectively and efficiently pass on the risk without it being priced.
Exactly. And so reduction of asymmetry in the marketplace, and there are several strategies. Your procurement strategy is one of them, because you reduce asymmetry down to effectively a conformance or non-conformance with what the client wants. So you'll have, a contractor might completely non-conform because they don't want the job, but at least you'll know straight away. And others will conform to that or show where they don't conform, provided they meet the performance requirements. And then the client is able to have a much better understanding of what they're going to get. So you're reducing asymmetry. And that is probably the biggest hurdle to get across in the construction industry, because the entire market is based on asymmetric warfare, really. It's about understanding that I've got knowledge. So, for example, knowledge about a subcontractor, how they went last on a job, but they happen to be nominated on the next one coming up. And you can't necessarily tell the client, actually, these guys or these girls didn't do a great job in this last job, but they've been nominated somehow. Because by providing the information, you put yourself in potentially a weaker contractual position because the client might want those subcontractors. So there's many cases of where asymmetry comes into bear that is most of the time a negative outcome for the client.
How do we change that, Daiman? What can we do? What things can we do to actually change how procurement happens in our marketplace? Because currently it's fucked. You and I both agree on that.
Yeah.
And I've had a full podcast on why it's fucked.
Yeah.
Which has actually got me thinking.
Yeah.
And that's led me to some of the ideas that I'm sharing with you.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do from your perspective?
Well, I think your procurement model is a really good place to start, but we have to and would work in a lot of cases. I think also that
Not without its challenges.
not definitely not, but I think that we have to have a real understanding of what risk is in this space, because I'm not going to be, well, let's say the majority of risk is roughly imaginary in this space. So, and if it's not, it's that might be a little bit of an overstatement. But what I mean by that is, and I've seen this all the time in the offsite manufacturing space. Most of the time, up until recently, a client approaching an offsite manufacturing company is on an emergency mission. They've got a job which they've taken through some kind of normal levels of procurement, all that kind of stuff, and they find it's too costly. And they've heard about this thing called offsite manufacturing, so they kind of look up, companies that do this, and then you get this hospital pass of a job. It happens all the time. And so what we need to have clients understand is the best value they get for their money is investing in what they want at the front end and then locking that in. The supply chain's responsibility there is to step up to make sure that they are good partners to work with.
Yeah.
Because, there are, just like in construction and offsite manufacturing, there are good parties to work with and not so good parties to work with. So we need to have an understanding that not all risk is equal. You can manage risk very effectively if you think about procuring a different way. And so, like your way of doing it is great. Working with an offsite manufacturing company, look, I specialize in figuring out the best way to build buildings in a certain typology class, and I engage with the supply chain regularly. We don't make the stuff up ourselves. We go and talk to the suppliers of this or this other product and say, what is the best way to use your product?
Do you know who Simplicity are?
Yeah, Shane. Yeah,
Shane.
Yeah.
You know Shane?
Oh yeah, been to the site. Phenomenal. Great. Yeah.
I had Shane earlier on the podcast as well.
Awesome.
We actually explored just that very thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
Come up with a set methodology, work with preferred partners, cut the waste, don't build in risk into your price.
No.
Give me a price that is your true cost plus margin, plus your 8%, 10%, whatever margin. Yep. And you'll always get paid on time, and you're my preferred partner to work with, and here's the best methodology to work with.
Sounds pretty simple, right?
Fuck, man, it sounds like the dream, doesn't it?
And again, the evidence is in the buildings.
Yeah.
Look at the buildings. I've been on the tour of the site out at Mount Wellington.
Yeah.
You won't find a cleaner, more well-organized site. And, I've been on, over the last 20 years, been on sites all around the world. I've been to more than 40 factories, prefab factories around the world. And so I know what good looks like, and Shane's good. And there are a few other parties that do that well. One thing I find they have in common, and this is the big takeaway from the work we did, and this is my number one mantra, is that you have to have a solid process and you have to understand who your client is.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you don't have process, you don't have anything. Everything's just made up. So if you've got a process-driven company, process-driven offsite manufacturing, on-site manufacturing, whatever it is, it doesn't need to be very prescriptive. But if you've got a process and that's evidence-backed and with a client in mind, you are well above anybody else in the industry.
Funny you should say that. That took me a year and a half to learn of me being a contractor. And like yourself, I was single-man band. And very, very quickly, once I started getting on a few team members, all I did was sit down with the whole team and workshop SOPs for just for controls and planning, what we do.
Yep.
And and we've got series of about 19 groups of SOPs written for exactly how we do things within strategic planning.
Yep.
Right now, all I have to do is pick up the phone and go, here's the problem, guys. On this job site, XER files available. Do this.
Yep.
Apply process number, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, great.
You know, oh my God. Like how much that's changed my life.
Yeah.
Like it's fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Like right now, because the team know exactly what they're doing. I know what to expect.
Yeah.
I've already worked out the solution with the client and just go apply the fucking process.
And with process, you've got two things. And as a one-man band myself, you got productivity and scalability.
Yep. Now I can absolutely scale because of the
Yep.
processes I've set up. But,
Yeah.
Damon, tell us a bit more about what kit parts actually means and why it's kind of valuable for the construction industry.
Well, I mean, it's important because in the same way that your classification and categorization is really important in this space. And really, kit parts is this kind of a strategy of breaking your building down into the parts that you need to build that building and then figuring out what the best parts are. And it's the combination of those parts together, which is where the value is. So what this does is it moves beyond kind of, space and figuring out like spatial grids and all those kind of things. It's a kind of like a joined up effort. And I have a kind of a process methodology of how I do this, a process as we talked about. There's a way in which you can solve to create the most efficient design and build and through a kit of parts. And it turns out there's an algorithm which you can follow, which helps you along the way.
Right.
And so whenever we create a kit of parts for a certain typology, and that's the most important thing, you need to know what you're solving for.
Is it different from a bill of materials?
It is. But a bill of materials is an output of a kit of parts.
Okay.
It's more about knowing in depth what the thing is.
Take a roof construction, for example.
Yep.
You got beams, then you got your purlins, you got your roof sheet, then you got your gutter, then you got your downpipe, you got whatnot.
That's right.
And what would you classify as a kit of parts in that example?
Well, it might be that you have a roof cassette that is able to combines all those elements together. Or we talked about there's a few kind of themes that go into a kit of parts sort of strategy. One is what we said before was SKU reduction, so reducing the amount of parts that you need to create the building.
So you look at the things that would actually form an entire roof, and you'd strip out everything that's actually not needed.
Yes. Or you'd combine function.
Waste.
Yeah, you'd combine function. So you would say, and this is why products like, if we talk about CLT or mass timber, are interesting because they're an excellent substrate for lots of different things to go on. So you might do a roof cassette that is a CLT slab, let's say, or you might do, and this goes back to if you want to do off-site manufacturing, kind of imaginary products have imaginary suppliers.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what the thing is, and we need to go and match make.
I see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So you group a bunch of objects together.
Yes.
To get them off-site manufactured as a kit of parts, so you can. Then it's an installation exercise, not a construction exercise.
Exactly, and also not to be a zealot about it. So there's
so
no.
Then that's actually quite powerful because then you don't need 4 different subtrades to actually come and hand off at different points to install those things.
That's right.
They come pre-installed and you just assemble them on site.
That's right, and
so it's not a full prefab solution; it's a part prefab solution.
Exactly,
right?
But that's it. That's it. And so. And that's why a lot of people go to the extreme is they create, full boxes offsite and transport boxes.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think.
Are you not?
No, because not in most cases, because I don't really see the benefits of that being outweighed by the capital investment it takes to move boxes of air around. I mean, this is a big exercise. So the more we can do in terms of things like parts and panels, rather than full volumes, the more options we've got in the supply chain. And also the more options we've got for scalability. So create a kit of parts approach that uses an exotic spice from Madagascar, for example, as your critical element is not going to be very successful or economical. But the more we can have a wider supply chain for the things we need, the better it will be for construction.
Yeah, I agree. Murphy O'Neill does a little bit of that with adaptable structures. His is pretty much a kit of parts then, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a kit of parts strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, where he actually then flat boxes his entire aluminium frame.
Yep.
To then assemble on site within 6 hours.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So, And then the I guess the success of that strategy or any kit apart strategy is in if you've found product market fit.
Yeah.
So if
that's where the challenge is, isn't it?
That's where the challenge is. So I'll give you a good example of product market fit in the building industry. Nightingale. Nightingale is a architect-led, kind of developer-less model for housing in Melbourne. They've got thousands of people on the waiting list to get into a Nightingale property.
Oh, yeah.
None of it uses prefabrication. It's all concrete-based at this stage. But they've got product market fit because they've developed something that particular clientele wants. Now, what every offsite manufacturer or anybody working in the kit apart strategy or even construction, what everybody wants, the dream is to have a queue of people at your door wanting what you've got.
Yeah.
And there's a way
Supply
to
and
get
demand,
there.
right?
100%. So instead of always asking for government, let's say, to give you a big contract and, all that kind of stuff per annum, find and create a product that is so desirable that you have a queue out the door for it. And there are some typologies that have the makings of that. I mentioned Nightingale in Australia.
Tiny homes is a bit like that.
It is.
When they actually kicked off.
It is. I mean, Victoria just has finally allowed for backyard buildings throughout Victoria. It's unlocked a massive market for that kind of innovation. Auckland is a perfect example of kind of backyard buildings, and you can throw.
What's that? I think 30 square meters. You don't need a consent anymore.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean you
don't quote me on that. I need to check exactly how many square meters. But
that 30 square meters doesn't require building consent. Yeah. If you have a bathroom or plumbing, you do require a building consent.
Fair.
But the thing is, you can manage that. You can start to build a kit set around that.
Yeah, interesting. No, I really hope New Zealand takes on a bit more of these kit parts and makes use of it to solve the housing crisis. Anyways, Daiman, I think it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. And
thank you. Likewise.
It's been a really interesting conversation. Final thoughts?
Oh, look, so much innovation, but any innovation needs good quality evidence to back it up. So look for evidence, look for data, as you well know. Find product market fit, research that term.
Yeah.
Make sure it's the heart of everything you do.
Oh, mate. And absolute pleasure having you on here. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Daiman.